Today I'm going to tell you about the foods of Islam. Food is important in all religions, of course, in Christianity, in Judaism, for special occasions and everything. But in Islam, it has a particular importance. First, for hospitality, which is a duty, for anybody who comes into the house, into anybody's house, they're received with drink and food without fail. But also it's very important because every single occasion, whether it's secular or religious, is marked by a certain food or certain foods, different dishes, etc. And it's also important for charity, especially during Ramadan and Eid. Most households who can afford it, of course, will make sure that they have food for their family and friends, of course, in abundance, because there's always an abundance of food, but to send out to those in need, or to have ready for those who come to the house who need food. Often they will kind of give money to caterers to make meals. This is during Ramadan, to send out for iftar in the mosques or in public squares. But then there are certain foods that are very important as well. And to begin with, the date. The date, from the birth of Islam, has been an essential food. Not only food, but also the tree, for the shade, for, building material, etc. But the date first is essential because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to break his fast with 3 dates. And most Muslims across the world will choose dates to break their fast. Of course, there are dishes made with dates as well, both savory and sweet. In Morocco, they make tagines with dates, fresh dates actually, called, I think, rutab at the stage, rutab. And in Iran, they add dates to different pilaus. And of course, dates are used in sweets like bathith in the United Arab Emirates. Date syrup is very important, poured over gaymat or used in muhammad, which is a kind of sweet savory rice. Another thing another food that is very important in Islam and for Muslims are whole animals. Usually it's either lamb or goat or actually baby camels. Reserved for Eid or for big family festivities or big family gatherings or a family member who's coming back from a long trip abroad. It would be cooked at home or ordered from a caterer. The way it would be done is that a member of the family or the cook or the driver would go to the live animal market and would choose a beautiful small lamb or goat or even the baby camel. And the most important part, if it's a baby camel, would be the hump, which is called Salam in Arabic. In the United Arab Emirates, the way to roast a whole animal is to marinate it in a beautiful marinade of, made with rose water, saffron, and a mixture of spices called bzar, and garlic and salt, of course. And you rub the animal with this marinade, then you wrap it in a wet straw mat. This is the traditional method. I'm pretty sure that very few people use it now. The marinated whole animal is wrapped in this wet straw mat and buried in a pit oven to cook very slowly, roast very slowly, during the day or overnight. And then it's served over a bed of rice. And during Eid, there is a tradition also of dividing the animal in 3. One for you, one for the family, and one to send out to those in need or to distribute to those in need. And this is very important. Alms or charity is very important in Islam, particularly during Ramadan and during Eid. And there'll always be food for those in need in all households, whether they're, modest or very rich. Of course, those who are wealthy will make a lot more. There are families who will prepare like 100 or 200 meals every day during Ramadan to distribute, and also during Eid. And these meals would include meat, of course, and the meat of preference is always lamb or goat, and for those who can afford it, or for the Bedouin families who have it available, there would be camel as well. The tradition in Islam is hospitality. Whoever comes to the house will have to be served coffee to start with. And Arabian coffee is very different from, let's say, espresso or Turkish coffee, because the beans are very lightly roasted. Then it's kind of boiled. The coffee is boiled with spices, cardamom, cloves, saffron, and then served in these tiny cups. And there is a whole protocol around it. When you're served the coffee, you have a dalla. The coffee is poured in a dalla, and the dalla is held in the right hand and the cups in the left hand. And then the server, whether it's, a person working for the family or a member of the family, would go around and pour these cups. And you drink the coffee very quickly because very little is poured in the cup. And if you don't want any more coffee, because they will keep serving you, you shake your hand, you shake the cup with your hand, and then you put it on the table. And the person who's going around with the coffee will understand that you don't want any more. But with the coffee or tea or soft drinks, there are the sweets. The sweets are super important throughout the year. As a mark of hospitality, you serve sweets, with the coffee, with the tea, with whoever comes and visits. But during Ramadan, it's even more important. And depending on where you are in the Arab world or in the Muslim world, you have extra sweets being made to kind of cater for the extra demand. And the sweets vary from like the super classic baklava to mamul, which is a typical sort of Ramadan sweet, and Eid sweet, to like local sweets like bathith, which is made with dates and flour, atayif, which is a kind of pancake that is filled with clotted cream and fried and dipped in syrup, tulgeimat, which are like little tiny fried donuts, but more crispy than a regular donut, and that are either dipped, soaked in syrup, or you have date syrup poured over them. And the range of sweets is enormous. There's also the classic umali that has, that is originally Egyptian, but has been adopted in the Emirates as a local sweet, which is basically a bread pudding. An Egyptian bread pudding, where layers of bread are put in a, baking dish, and either layered with nuts, or nuts are spread all over the top, and then sweetened milk, poured over, and then it's baked. And it's quite a sort of comforting and delicious sweet. This is usually served not so much, with the sort of within the hospitality, kind of protocol, but as either as a snack or after a meal. So now I'm going to show you how to make date ice cream, given that dates are so important in Islam and in the Gulf, because it's one of the main sort of fruit that is grown in the oasis. It's a very interesting ice cream, which is made by, kind of using dried dates, pitted dried dates, and processing them in food processor with the cream until you have a very smooth puree. And then that puree is mixed with milk that is slightly sweetened, because the dates are, of course, very sweet. and then thickened with salep or sahlab, which is a powder extracted from dried wild orchid tubers that are usually grown in Turkey, but you find them also in Iran, and I think in the Balkans as well. It is now endangered, and I think they don't allow export from Turkey. But it's a wonderful starch that thickens the milk in a very interesting way that makes it stretchy and chewy. And the ice cream is different, has a different texture from the regular gelato. And the flavoring of this ice cream is cardamom, ground cardamom, which is the quintessential flavor of, the Gulf. And I should say also Iran to a certain extent. The flavoring is basically two ingredients. One is rose water and the other is cardamom, which is actually the quintessential spice of the Gulf. And so the milk is boiled with the sahlab, and then, as you will see in the demo, and then added to the date puree with the flavorings. And you end up with a beautiful, thick, kind of stretchy and chewy ice cream where the flavor, if you know the flavor of dates, you can recognize it. But if you don't, you might even think that it's kind of caramel. I gave it to a Sicilian friend of mine, to taste, and she couldn't quite place the flavor of dates. But of course, here they don't eat very many dates, so they're not familiar with them. I hope you will enjoy the demo, and there will be a recipe at the end that you can, follow and use. And thank you for listening. So now I have put the pitted dates into the food processor, and I'm going to add the cream. And I will process the two together to have a kind of basically a loose date paste that will go into the milk that has been thickened with salep and then the other ingredients. So these are the pitted dates with the cream, which I have put in the food processor, and I'm going to process until I have a smooth paste, which I will then add to the milk that has been thickened with the salep and the other ingredients. I tried to film it from the beginning with the dates and the cream separate, but it was too hard to film on my own because it took some time to break down the dates. But this is what you want to end up with, a kind of thick paste. Paste that is not completely smooth, but will mix with the milk thickened with salep and will be lovely. As you can see, we now have a kind of like a date puree. The cream and the dates have mixed very well together, and the paste is actually quite smooth. Step 1 is the cream and dates pulverized together into a kind of fine, quite smooth paste, really. And then I will add the milk thickened with salep and the seasonings, which are cardamom and rose water. The milk is slightly sweetened with sugar, but depending on the taste, you might not need to. And now I'm whisking the salep in with the milk until it boils. The milk has a slightly darker color because I've added the sugar is raw cane. And you have to whisk it all the time, otherwise you will get lumps in the milk. And once the milk is done, it'll be, I'll whisk it for about 15 minutes to 20 minutes after it starts boiling, so that it gets kind of thick, basically like cream or a thin custard. And then I'll add it to the cream and date puree, plus the flavorings, which are rose water and ground cardamom. I think you can see here how the milk has thickened compared to how it was at the beginning. It's not thick to the point, this is the bottom of the pan, but it's okay. I think I had the fire a bit too high. You really need to do it on a slow heat so that the milk doesn't stick. But if there are lumps, you can strain it, but you don't really need to. You just leave the bottom of the pan alone, and if there is a little bit like on the whisk like this, then it will, you can just get rid of it, or it will dilute eventually. So now I'm going to add the milk to the date puree, the date and cream puree, and whisk it together. You can also let it cool if you want, but it's not going to be to make any difference if you use the milk kind of hot. I don't want it to fall back into the milk. I think it's going to be very difficult to film by myself, so I will whisk it in. I have now added the ground cardamom, and I will whisk it in before I add more milk and then the rose water. And here it is churning. I'm making half plain, like this one, and the other half I've added slivered pistachios to make it a little bit more interesting, and actually a little bit less intense. The flavor of dates is very intense by itself, which is very nice, but I think you can kind of alternate between, plain date ice cream and date and pistachio ice cream, or any other nut for that matter. Well, maybe not walnuts, but slivered almonds or pine nuts would be quite nice. And here is the ice cream almost ready. It needs another few minutes to kind of freeze properly. And then I'll make the second batch, which has the slivered pistachios, and see which is more interesting. So this is the version with the slivered pistachios. Nearly ready. You can see the pistachios churning with the ice cream. I think this version would be better, it would be more interesting. But the plain version is not bad. You can do half-half like I did and serve them together for your guests or your family to decide which they prefer.